that time of the year again. Christmas is over and the rain is beating against the windows, and it's time for my rundown of my favourite films of 2023. I've seen 205 films during 2023, either at the cinema or on streaming, so cutting it down to a top 10 has been a very difficult task as usual. So here are the ones that didn't quite make the grade that make up my 20 to 11 slots. At number 20, I have Talk to Me, a innovative low-budget Australian horror which had one of the best endings of any film during 2023 that I saw. At number 19, we have Godzilla Minus One, a truly surprising experience at the cinema that far exceeded my expectations. At number 18, The Great Escaper. Michael Caine and, in her last film, Glenda Jackson, serve up something special. At number 17, A Man Called Otto. Tom Hanks playing against his normal type as the grumpy and lugubrious titular hero. At number 16 is Killers of the Flower Moon. Martin Scorsese's epic film was simply brilliant and I gave it 5 stars. But it's only at my number 16 because rewatchability needs to factor into it at some point. And for me, it's great, but I don't particularly want to watch it again. At number 15 is Barbie. This is probably in lots of people's top 10 for the year and possibly in some people's worst 10 for the year. It was that sort of Marmite movie. But Barbie was definitely the phenomenon of the summer and it's made over $1.4 billion at the box office. At number 14 is The Creator. Gareth Edwards delivers a truly epic sci-fi spectacular. At number 13, I have Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. I simply love this sword and sorcery romp, with Chris Pine and Hugh Grant being as dastardly as ever. It's also a great soundtrack by Lorne Balfe, which is one of my favourites of the year. At number 12, I have Anatomy of a Fall, which I think might clinch the international film at next year's Oscars. We will see. Sandra Hüller is simply spectacular in this twisty whodunit set in the French Alps. And at number 11, we have another 5-star film from me, Air, where Matt Damon and Ben Affleck re-team to retell the story of the Air Jordan brand. So that's my 11 to 20 films. Let's proceed to my top 10.
My mom never came home from her trip. I don't know where she is.
I'm calling about a guest you had.
Espere, ¿no habla español?
Does anyone speak English?
I'm sorry.
This is Elijah Park.
Please, I need your help.
The FBI doesn't have jurisdiction to investigate in Colombia.
So is there anything I can do?
The best thing you can do to help us is just wait by your phone.
Say hi, Mommy.
Hi, Junebug.
I'm not giving up on my mom.
So my number 10 is Missing, and this is made by the same team who did Searching from a few years back. And the film is similarly shot through the lens of electronic devices alone. Storm Reid is terrific in this tale of a teen trying to find where her mother has disappeared to on a trip to Colombia.
The world was done with clowning. It moved on to TikTok dances and live streaming hand jobs on the dark web. But none of that works now. Everything is obsolete except us.
The world is ours now. We're forming a troupe. Clownpedo. You know, like a torpedo of clowns.
At my number 9 is Apocalypse Clown. Now, comedy is extremely subjective, but this low-budget Irish film made me laugh more than any comedy did in 2023. Natalie Palamides in particular deserves an award for bringing to life Funzo the Clown, a classic comedy character.
What kind of movie are we gonna make?
You dismiss what he does. It's playful or imaginative. You could afford to be a little encouraging.
She should have been a concert piano player. What she got in her heart is what you got.
You can't just love something, you also have to take care of it.
It's more important than your hobby. Can you stop calling it a hobby?
And my number 8 is The Fabelmans. Clearly a very personal project for Steven Spielberg. Seeing Spielberg's early attempts at filmmaking by using models and low-budget special effects was wonderful. I just wish the artifice had been dropped and the film had been called The Spielbergs.
Allow me to refresh your memory in the form of a song so ruinously catchy that it may never leave your mind.
Oh, I don't think I want to hear that.
Too late. I've started dancing now. Once we've started, we can't stop, you see. Oompa, loompa, doompa-dee-doo. I've got a tragic tale for you.
And my number 7 is Wonka, a film which has been packing in the crowds in the UK this holiday season. It's already heading for a £35 million box office in the UK and Ireland alone. This is a splendidly entertaining musical with a toe-tapping set of new songs by Neil Hannon of the Divine Comedy, mixed in with classics from the original Gene Wilder film. This is a film that is set to be a classic in the hearts of a new generation of children.
I'm gonna meet my ex for the first time since the breakup.
And you're still calling it the breakup.
I thought we were fine. We were better than fine. We moved in together, but we had Hamilton tickets.
It's a serious commitment.
Right?
So, what happened?
She cheated on me with my best friend.
You cheated on Tom? With him?
Oh, that hurts a little bit.
I mean, I get it. The arms are nice, but why'd she even talk about it?
Are you just going to sit there and let her say that to me?
Well, she said my arms are nice.
And my number 6 is Rye Lane, a Love Actually for the 2020s without any of the dodgy bits. This rom-com is truly delightful, and if you haven't caught it yet, make sure you do.
Oh, bliss. Bliss, bliss, bliss. Oh, this song. God, I haven't heard this song in forever. I used to hang out with them all, actually, when I was modelling. Britpop, Blur, Oasis, goth, parties. But then, of course, Common People came out, and everybody thought it was written about me, which was completely mortifying and ridiculous. I mean, I barely knew Jarvis. What? But she came from Greece. She had a thirst for knowledge. It couldn't have been me. I've never wanted to know anything.
Into my top 5, and at number 5 I have Saltburn. Emerald Fennell's difficult second album proves not to be so hard after all, as she doubles down on some scenes of extremely dubious taste and leaves you gasping by the end with the audacity of it all. You will never hear Murder on the Dance Floor in the same way again.
Piditkö filmistä?
Pidin. En ole koskaan nauranut niin paljon.
Tapaammeko siis vielä?
Haluaisitko?
Kovastikin.
Anna numeroni.
At my number 4, I have Fallen Leaves. I saw this at the London Film Festival and promptly fell in love with it. Aki Kaurismäki delivers a sombre kind of cute meet in a depressing Helsinki with a depressed and unmoored couple. All the humour is exceptionally dry and deadpan, and I just loved it for that. And there's also a cute dog.
Come on. Miss Hadbury, you are your sister. It's her mysterious invention, Lola.
Lola is a system of electrical processors which allows us to observe broadcasts from the future.
This is magnificent, it's beautiful.
It's going to change history.
This is the true magic.
Movies, royal weddings, a musical rebellion, signals beamed around the world.
Because of this pioneering work, this marks a huge turning point in the war against Nazi Germany.
At my number 3 is a real surprise of a low-budget time travel film by Andrew Legg. Lola is just so clever in its storytelling, helped along by some wonderful songs, again by Neil Hannon, who gets a second mention in my top 10.
What a good story this is. Childhood sweethearts who reconnect 20 years later and realize they were meant for each other. In the story, I would be the evil white American husband standing in the way of destiny.
Shut up. He was just this kid in my head for such a long time. I think I just missed him.
Did he miss you?
At my number 2, I have Past Lives. It's almost incredible to believe that this is the directorial debut of Celine Song. The film has won a lot of plaudits and is likely to feature strongly in the forthcoming Oscars. This story of childhood sweethearts from South Korea meeting up again in New York years later is just blissful and features one of the most heart-stopping finales of the year.
We're in a race against the Nazis. And I know what it means if the Nazis have a bomb.
We have a 12-month head start.
18.
How could you possibly know that?
We've got one hope. All America's industrial might and scientific innovation connected here. A secret laboratory. Keep everyone there until it's done.
Let's go recruit some scientists.
To be honest, I went back and forwards about what should be my top film for the year, but for me, Oppenheimer was such a dramatic cinema experience. From the filling, loosening bass sound to the brilliant performances by Cillian Murphy and Robert Downey Jr., both of who will be in the running for my Best Actor and Best Supporting Actor slots at the forthcoming Oscars. Oppenheimer gets my number 1 film of the year. So that is my rundown of my personal choice of the top 20 films of 2023. Will you agree with them? Almost certainly not. Film is wonderfully subjective, and many of those films will simply not be your cup of tea. But that's fine. Early in the new year, we're going to be having the Flickering Dreams rundown of the top 10 films of the year, and indeed the worst 5 films of the year from our collective view. So that will be interesting to see how they differ, and differ they most certainly will. Thanks for watching. I hope you continue to tune in to Flickering Dreams on YouTube or audio platforms during 2024, and continue to read my film reviews on onemansmovies.com. A very happy new year to you all.